Hello, and welcome to the previously recorded webinar, Domestic Violence Shelters and Pets, Creating a Pet-Friendly Program That Works for You, with Katie Campbell from RedRover. Just a reminder about some things about domesticshelters.org, who's hosting this alongside RedRover today. So as you may know, we're the fastest growing online resource for domestic violence information and resources. We help about 3 million people every year, and that includes victims, survivors, advocates, and concerned citizens. We have a searchable database of over 2,800 domestic violence programs in the US and Canada. And if you, your organization, you're not sure if you're listed in our database, please just reach out to me. My email address is down there, just ashley@domesticshelters.org. And once you claim your listing and update your information, you're able to set up a free wish list, which allows donors from anywhere in the world to ship items directly to your shelter. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Katie Campbell from RedRover, and she's going to start the presentation.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Ashley.
No problem.
So first to start, I just want to thank everyone for spending, an hour of your day with me. I know our lives are extremely busy right now. And so I just want to thank you for that. I want to thank you also for the continued work that all of you and your organizations are doing to serve our communities right now. Really just a heartfelt thanks to you all for the work that you're doing on the ground. And a special thank you to Ashley and domesticshelters.org for helping us to bring this information to all of you. So a couple of things before we get started. There are a couple of staff from RedRover who are going to be assisting in the chat box. And also, I believe, on the Facebook Live feed to help answer your questions and just kind of connect with you there. I got to say, it is really, really cool to see where everybody is chiming in from. I sort of lost track there for a second because there are so many folks who are here. So I'm just super excited to see folks from across the country and also a couple of folks from outside of the US. I saw Canada and Germany in there. There might have been a couple others that snuck by me. So really excited to see all of you here. And I love doing these kind of trainings and presentations, and I'm happy to be doing it with you all in this format. And I apologize if it feels like I'm talking at you a lot. That's certainly not how I usually like to do these things. I love discussions and conversations and kind of feeling through your challenges and your concerns and your successes. So throughout the presentation, there are a couple of opportunities where I'm going to ask you to chat some information, to share some of your thoughts with me, because I really do enjoy learning from all of you through these kinds of experiences. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce you to RedRover, just give you kind of a broad sweep of what we do here at RedRover. We're going to talk about pets and domestic violence. We're going to talk about pet-friendly programs. And really, one of my biggest goals and the things that I really want you to leave this webinar with are resources and some concrete next steps. No matter where you're at in this process of creating a pet-friendly program, I want you to leave feeling like you have some concrete next steps. So, and the one last piece of information I'll give you is about myself before we get started. So I have worked in nonprofits for about 10 plus years now. Many years of that was spent in social services, where I worked with families with young children, many of whom were experiencing domestic violence. And I also consider myself to be a lifelong animal lover. My mom was the president of our Humane Society, where I grew up in North Carolina. We always had foster animals coming through. I've always had a love for animals. And full disclosure, I have to say that before I came to RedRover about 4.5 years ago, I did not put pets and domestic violence together. I just didn't know that it was an issue. And so I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you all is to not assume that everybody in your community knows about the link or knows about the issue of pets and domestic violence. And many of you may already know about this. Many of you may not. So we will go over some basics of that, some basics of the link. But definitely one of my biggest pieces of advice is to not assume that everybody knows that this is an issue. So let's talk a little bit about RedRover. So we have been around for about 30 plus years. We started with this program over here on the left called RedRover Responders. And it's a volunteer program. So basically, we're kind of like the Red Cross for animals. So we train volunteers throughout the country on how to provide temporary emergency sheltering services in natural disasters, puppy mill seizures, other types of seizures, criminal cases. And somewhat new, we also have teams of volunteers that go out with our collaborative partner, GreaterGood.org's Rescue Rebuild program, and actually help domestic violence shelters become pet friendly. And I'll show you some photos from that a little later on in this presentation. Over on the right, you see our RedRover Readers program. So this really is all about teaching kids about kindness and compassion and empathy for pets and ultimately people. So we do this through books, we do it through an empathy app that we developed, and we also do it through the Kind News program. And then finally, we have our RedRover Relief program. So on one side of RedRover Relief is where we have our urgent care grants. And so this is really helping folks with some emergency vet care. And also because of the COVID-19 crisis, we are helping with some boarding. So folks who are affected with COVID-19 and need some help with boarding while they're getting treatment, we are helping with that as well. And then on the other side of our RedRover Relief program are domestic violence programs. And so that's really where we're going to spend most of our time today. So normally I would ask many of you to raise your hand if you have a pet. I'm going to just assume that many of you probably do have a pet at home, and you are not alone. So almost 80 million American homes have pets. That's 65% of American homes have pets. And in 70% of homes with children under the age of 6, they have at least one pet. So I would love it. Somebody just did this, that they have 3 cats. I would love if you want to share, your furry companion's names. Maybe it's a feathered friend, but definitely please share what kind of companion animals you have if you'd like. It's fun to see where everybody is at with that. But I think it's really important to see here that we have a lot of American homes with kids and pets together. Okay? And we're going to touch on that again in a little bit. So like I said, many of you may already know about the link between human and animal violence, and some of you may not. So I want to go through a couple of slides just so we're kind of all on the same page here. And also keep in mind that this is really important information to have when you're creating buy-in from your staff, from your board, and from your community at large, okay? So essentially the idea here is that when one type of violence here exists, it is highly likely that there's another form of violence happening in that home, okay? So I think Phil Arco, the coordinator of the National Link Coalition, sums it up really nicely when he said, when animals are abused, people are at risk. When people are abused, animals at risk. And I don't think it can get any simpler than that. And I would encourage everyone to take a look at the National Link Coalition website. You will get that link towards the end of this presentation. Wealth of information that you're going to want to share with your community and everybody who you're trying to educate about this issue. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this issue of pets and domestic violence. So research, and I will say, I will give the caveat, this research is a little bit older. We do see some new research coming out. There is a great researcher right now, Andrew Campbell, who is doing some research. A lot of it is based, I believe, out of his home state of Indiana. So he is kind of bringing some new research to this light. I know there's some new research happening up in Canada as well. But I think these figures are still pretty much spot on. So up to 70% of DV victims that came into shelter reported having a pet. And 71% of those pet-owning women reported animal abuse. Now, when we talk about animal abuse here, we are talking about the threatening to harm, the harm, and the killing of pets. And 48% of those pet-owning women reported that the abuse occurred often in the last year. And I want to kind of tie it back to that kids piece again. So of those incidents, 76% occurred in the presence of children, and 32% reported that their children hurt or killed animals. So I really like to point this out because we've got a real opportunity here to teach the next generation a different story about pets and violence and the human-animal bond and how important our pets are to us. So the first question I want to ask, and I would love it, I love seeing all the pets, the furry companions, the animals that are coming in on our chat. And so I would love it if now you might share with me why you think abusers might target pets. So if you have some thoughts that you want to share in the chat box, I'd love to see them. I'll give you about 30 seconds for everybody to chime in. Yeah, these are great. Absolutely, I see power and control, sort of an easy target. I think a couple other folks shared that you know, the abuser knows that this is a special relationship for the survivor, and then definitely the legal or the consequence side. You know, it's our laws against animal abuse are not the same across the U.S. And so definitely that can be a factor. So some of the ones that we see most often, maintain terror and fright, right? Eliminate source of support and comfort. I'm going to take away that last piece of comfort that you have. Force their family to return home. I hear this from a lot of domestic violence shelters. So essentially when the survivor does leave, and unfortunately has to leave the pet behind, that pet can often be the tool to get the family to return home. Reinforce that there is no safe place, and obviously gain more power and control. So what does this mean? This means that survivors often delay leaving out of concern for their pets. So again, the research offers us a range here of 18 to 48%. And you know, we've heard from many of our domestic violence shelters that number could actually be a whole lot higher. I believe one specific shelter shared with us that the rate they have is closer to 65%. And I would also just point out here that these are the survivors who eventually leave. So we do not know how many survivors do not end up leaving out of concern for their pet, okay? And we've heard from survivors, and many domestic violence shelters have heard this as well, that survivors are going to live in their cars with their pets rather than leaving them behind. I believe we had one specific case through our Safe Escape grants where a survivor stayed in their car for about 6 months before they could get some support. So statistics are great, but I want to give everybody a moment to kind of hear from the survivor and advocate perspective. So I'm going to give you just a few seconds to read these quotes. And again, here we just see this idea where the survivor shares that they would not have left. They would have not come into shelter if they didn't have a safe place to stay, if their pet didn't have a safe place. So how do we support survivors and their pets? What do we do with this information? So we see that there's an issue. We see that there's a link between pets and domestic violence. And we see that it's a real barrier, a real challenge for survivors to find safety if they don't have a safe place for their pets. So for RedRover, underneath our RedRover Relief Program, we have 3 different programs. So we have the safeplaceforpets.org website. So this is essentially a website where you can go and you can search by zip code, city, state, or province, and you're going to get a list or a map of resources in that area that provide assistance to pets. So this could be a domestic violence shelter that offers on-site housing, or maybe they have an off-site program, or it could also be an animal rescue group that provides support to survivors in some way. And then we also have our RedRover Safe Escape grants. So essentially, these grants help cover the cost of boarding while a survivor is at a domestic violence shelter. So it's an application that you complete online. It's really important to note that this is the advocate. So the domestic violence shelter advocate is the one who is filling out this application. We don't want to communicate with the survivor just to maintain confidentiality. Safety is most important to us. And so we really want to communicate with that advocate. And you're going to get a response within 24 hours. So please note that you see the Monday through Friday here. We are not a 24-hour, 7 days a week organization. So we are actually RedRover is located in Sacramento, California. So our work week is generally Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to about 4 p.m. And if you get that application in during that time frame, you're most likely going to get a response much more quickly than that 24-hour time frame. Our folks, Rachel is one of them, they know that these are emergency situations, and so they really want to reply to you and get this to you, if applicable, as soon as possible. So real quick highlight, we've been doing a Safe Escape grant since 2007. We have provided more than 33,480 safe nights of boarding, and that's for 1,227 pets. And I always like to point out some of the pets that we've helped. So obviously we've got dogs and cats that we help, but also birds, horses, goats, and a guinea pig. So really what a big focus of today's presentation is on pet-friendly programs. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what I mean with a pet-friendly program. But I like to show this slide because for me, the way a pet-friendly program works really well is when you have good partnerships in place. And these 3 are the most important partnerships or most important organizations that you really need to have working together in order to make a pet-friendly program work. So for domestic violence organizations, it's really important that you ask about pets at intake. I know that for some shelters, domestic violence shelters, they haven't wanted to ask because they haven't had the resource to share. Well, now you have the Safe Escape resource. You have the safeplaceforpets.org. And so I really encourage you to start asking about pets. For one, survivors most likely aren't going to tell you if they have a pet unless you ask them directly. There's a huge amount of judgment, I think, and shame that can go into this. And so many survivors have shared that they just feel ashamed that they don't want to leave because of the pet. Right. So the next component we have here are our veterinarians. The second point I want to make about asking about pets, apologies, is also that this is really going to help you build your case and create your plan for a pet-friendly program. So what I mean by build your case is you're going to be able to show to your board, to your staff, to your community that this is an issue in your community, that you have X number of survivors who are delaying leaving or will not leave because of their pets. And it's also going to help you understand capacity. If you want to take on some on-site housing, how many pets do you need to plan for? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So veterinarians, it's really important that veterinarians know the signs of abuse and domestic violence, and they know how to respond to that. And then animal organizations. We probably don't have any animal organizations on here, but it's really important that animal organizations ask about domestic violence when somebody comes in to relinquish a pet. I was at a conference, Humane Society of the U.S. conference about 2 years ago. It's a room about 45 or 50 people giving a similar presentation to this. And I asked folks in the room, to raise their hands if their organization asked about pets at relinquishment. And I kid you not, there was not one hand that got raised. And so this is really important when you start this conversation with animal organizations in your community, because you need to work with them, and you need to help them understand that they most likely have pets who are being relinquished because of domestic violence. And now when these pets are relinquished, they've got to work on getting these pets adopted. And there's also some safety concerns as well. And so really just kind of helping them understand the issue is going to be really important. And so what do these three do together? What do you do with the veterinarians and the animal organizations? Well, you collaborate and you create a pet-friendly program. And one of the most important pieces of this is cross-training. So domestic violence organizations, you're going to train your veterinarians and your animal organizations about how to talk about domestic violence. How do you appropriately ask? How do you respond to it? And our animal organizations and our veterinarians are going to train you and your staff on how to treat animals, how to do basic behavior stuff. And so there's really an excellent opportunity for cross-training and learning here. So what do I mean when I say a pet-friendly program? So there are generally two categories that we kind of lump this into. The first is on-site or co-sheltering. So on-site housing or co-sheltering. This is where we'll spend a little bit more time here in a few minutes. Generally speaking, this can look three different ways at a domestic violence shelter. So if your shelter has individual living units or individual rooms, you may be able to house pets in room with their family members. If you don't have that situation or don't want to do in-room housing, perhaps you have an existing space that you can utilize. So this might be a laundry room or a storage space that you're able to convert to have some crates or kennels and to allow pets to stay in those spaces. Or perhaps you don't have room inside, but you have a little bit of yard around your shelter and you want to put in a new shed or a building. So this could be as simple as, think of one of those tough sheds from like Home Depot. It could be as simple as that, taking like a 10 by 12 shed, splitting it down the middle, and you've got 2 dog kennels. It could be doing more of a substantial building that allows you to house more animals. So this could look a lot of different ways as well. And we are going to talk a little bit more about that on-site housing. And then the other category that we usually see includes off-site housing. So this could be that the pet stays at your animal partner organization. It could be that they get boarded at your local vet or boarding facility. And it could also be a foster-based program. So we've talked about the, kind of the issue, and we've talked about the need for, or what different pet-friendly programs look like, but I want to talk a little bit about the why. So for one, it's going to eliminate barriers to safety. So remember that we have about 18 to 48% of our survivors who are delaying leaving because they can't take their pet. So with a pet-friendly program, we're going to take down that barrier. Remember that pets might be used as a tool to get the family to return home. So if we create a pet-friendly program, we're helping to keep survivors and families safe. We're reinforcing the human-animal bond. So remember we talked about the number of kids who then turn towards violence towards animals. So here with the pet-friendly program, we're helping entire families find safety together, and we're teaching our kids that this is an appropriate way to be with our pets and not what the abuser was teaching. And really, I think what is one of the most exciting things is that we're really facilitating healing. We're healing the humans, we're healing the pets, and the human-animal bond can also facilitate healing, age attachment, and provide a source of comfort to both survivors and children, so adults and kids here. You know, there's a lot of scientific evidence coming out now that shows that human-animal interactions reduce anxiety, they reduce blood pressure, cholesterol levels, all while helping to build trust and teach coping skills. So one of the research questions that I love to point out was some researchers asked a group of 5-year-olds, Whom do you turn to when you're feeling sad, angry, happy, or wanting to share a secret? And I don't think it comes as any surprise that 42% of those kids mentioned their pets. I mean, think about those of you who shared that you have pets. You know, after a long, hard day, who do you sometimes turn to for that feeling of comfort? You know, who makes you feel happy? Who makes you feel centered and grounded again? I know for me, it's definitely my pets. So, and again, I want you to hear from an advocate. So I'll give you just a minute to read there. So really, the people heal the pets and the pets heal the people. Two-way street here. All right, so now we've talked about what pet-friendly programs are, why we want to start them, and I know you're all on board and you're really excited and you want to start your pet-friendly programs, but what are the barriers to on-site housing or co-sheltering? I know you got them, so I'm going to give everybody about 30 seconds to share in the chat box what are some of the barriers to co-sheltering that you experience? Awesome. These are great barriers that you're sharing. And rest assured, you all are not alone. So these are some of the most common barriers that we hear about. So thank you for sharing your barriers there. And before we continue any further, I just want to say that this hour-long webinar is really an overview. I literally could talk about this all day long, and I do talk about it all day long with our partner from Rescue Rebuild. And so I'm going to touch on a couple of these barriers, but I really want to encourage you to reach out to me after this webinar. And you know, we can talk about more of these barriers, but just in the interest of time, we're not going to be able to get through all of these barriers. So a couple of the ones that I saw in the chat that I want to pull out, and let me just make one quick note so I can remember to touch on it. The first one I want to pull out are abandoned pets, and I'm actually going to advance the slide one more. And I'm going to pull up these tips for success, and we'll walk through these here in just a minute. But I want to walk through abandoned pets because I believe somebody actually reached out offline before this webinar to ask about abandoned pets. And I know that that's an issue and that's a concern for many domestic violence shelters before starting this kind of program. Let me tell you that almost everybody I talk to has this fear before they start a program. And after they start their program, they share that it's not as big of an issue as they feared it would be. The fact is that abandonment just doesn't happen that often. But what's going to really help you, and your tip for success with this, is that partnerships are key. So go back to that slide that showed domestic violence organizations, veterinarians, and animal organizations. So this is where you're going to call on your animal partner, your animal organization partner, to help you with this. And so when, in the rare occasion that somebody does leave a pet behind, your animal organization is going to sign on and help rehome that animal. Hopefully, ideally, they're going to be able to help rehome that animal outside of the geographic location just for safety purposes. But that's where your partnership is going to come in key for the abandoned animals. Allergies. I can speak to this. I am actually allergic to my dogs and my cats, so I do know that this is a thing. But this is pretty easy to work through. Let's say you have individual rooms, and you want to do the in-room housing model, so where pets are staying with their family members. This can be as simple, allergies can be as simple as making sure you have the right materials in your room, so the right flooring, the right cleaning products, and also perhaps it's designating a few of your rooms as pet friendly, or a few of your rooms that you don't allow pets in. And so that can really help with the allergy piece. A good cleaning is really honestly going to go a long way. A good cleaning with the right flooring, the right materials in the room. And to be fair, if, allergies are things that folks are going to have to worry about in life. And so really kind of working with the pet owning and the non-pet owning families on this is going to be really key. I think I'm not sure if I saw dog bites come up. But this one is also really where your partnerships are going to come in handy. So this is where your animal organization, your veterinarian, are going to step in and maybe help with some behavior training if that's needed. Or if the pet is just not thriving on site, and they are maybe experiencing or exhibiting some of that kind of behavior, or they're just really anxious and they're barking all the time and you can't, toys and enrichment aren't helping, that's where your animal organization partner is going to step in and house them on site or house them through a fostering program, however you've predetermined that relationship to look like. So again, your partnership's going to be really key there. And then somebody mentioned vaccinations and fleas and ticks, and absolutely, these are things to be aware of and be concerned about, but they're all pretty simple to work through. So again, you're going to go back to your partner, and your vet is going to work with you to make sure that when pets come in, they get the vaccinations, they get the flea and tick medicine that they need. Ideally, they're going to do it for free, but if they're not going to do it for free, they're going to do it for you at low cost. And they're going to make sure, it's really important that when those pets do come into shelter, they do get that initial exam from a vet, because it's highly likely that the pet was abused in this violence. And so we want to make sure that the pet is taken care of, right? And then the other point about vaccinations and getting that initial vet visit is that you want to start to make sure that the paperwork is in your survivor's name. However, you want to work that out with confidentiality, but you want to start showing ownership for that pet with the survivor. Because oftentimes we do see that abusers will deny vet care and kind of deny that ownership piece, okay? So I know that there are many other challenges that you all identified. And so please do reach out to me. And I'm happy to kind of walk you through what I've heard. And I'm also happy to connect you with other domestic violence organizations who have been experiencing some of this and have already kind of done this work. And I actually see in the chat, some folks are kind of already sharing how they're doing it. So thank you for that. So a couple other tips for success: keep it simple. You don't have to go out big. Okay, you can start by housing 3 pets on site. You can start by housing only cats and using your partner organization for dogs. Just keep it simple. You can grow down the road as you start building capacity within your organization and support in your community. You don't need to go big. It's okay to say no. I believe this was also a question that came in. I worked in social services, as I shared. I know no can be uncomfortable, but sometimes you just got to say it, and it's okay, because remember, you're going to have those partnerships that are going to help you. You can say no to having the snake. I see that somebody shared about a snake. It's okay to say we're not able to house your snake, but our animal partner is going to be able to help us with that. It's also okay to have a survivor come in with their pet and the pet just isn't thriving on site. It's creating some issues. And so it's okay to say, no, we're not able to house your pet on site right now, but we are going to work with our animal partner for this, right? Create a backup plan. you got to you may be housing on site, but you got to create that backup plan for when on site isn't working. One of my personal favorites, educate all shelter residents and staff. So all your shelter staff who are going to be working with animals, all your shelter staff who are not working with animals, and you got to educate all your pet owning residents and your non-pet owning residents. So you're educating them on your pet owning residents on, kind of your guidelines for having a pet on site. But this is also a great opportunity for you to teach your non-pet owning residents, how do you appropriately approach a dog? I'm sure many of you have seen some encounters out in public where, especially little kids, I see it a lot, they want to run up to the dog and they want to put their face in the dog's face. And so this is a really great opportunity for us to teach everybody about how to appropriately approach and be around pets. Evaluate your program. So you need to evaluate every step of the way. Evaluate periodically. You need to evaluate, you need to ask your pet owning residents, how's it going? You need to ask your non-pet owning residents, how's it going? Because it's going to help you kind of tweak your program to make sure it works for everybody. But you're probably also going to get some really great data that's going to help you even with fundraising. So we hear from a lot of shelters that non-pet owning residents love having pets on site. And so it's a really great opportunity for them to kind of get all those positive benefits from pets. And those are great stories that you can share out to your community. And lastly, I think one of my most important ones is trust your skills. I guarantee you and your staff already have the skills you need to manage this kind of program. So I am absolutely not equating pets to kids. I love kids as well. But you are already dealing with probably some sort of sticky situations around childcare and how kids are at your locations. So take all those skills that you use in those situations, and all you got to do is switch them over to pets and people. You really do have all the skills that you need to make this kind of program work. So what I would love to do is give you just about 30 seconds or a minute, maybe a little bit longer, to think about what organizations can you work with in your area. And I want you to drop those answers into your chat box. And, I love that we have people from all over the country because it I think other folks get ideas from other people who aren't in their local area. So 30 seconds to a minute, drop in some ideas. I see lots of rescue organizations, humane societies. Love it. Keep them coming. Blue Ridge Humane Society, is that one of my North Carolina folks? I love it. Awesome. Take about 15 more seconds. I love it. So a few of the ideas that I've heard from folks around the country, I've got up here. And I love all these responses, lots of vets, PetSmarts, Petco's, absolutely. Don't forget about your pet supply stores. I see kennels, animal control, love it. I love that. Farmers, absolutely. So, especially with our rural communities, you're going to have some of those bigger companion animals that you're going to need to find placement for. So absolutely love that. I don't want you to forget, and apologies if somebody has mentioned these. I tried to keep an eye on all of them. Don't forget about your animal trainers, your canine dog trainers, service groups. So like Kiwanis, Rotary, those kind of folks, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. I don't think I saw any schools or universities. So don't forget about schools and universities. And so I mean schools, elementary schools, all the way up to your universities. Don't forget that, you know, a lot of universities have a service requirement. Students do have service requirements. And so reaching out to them for those kind of things is great. Church groups, food banks, especially right now, you know, I've seen personally a lot of food banks and animal organizations opening up and expanding their services to include pet food, and seniors. You know, let's not forget about our seniors. They have a lot to contribute when it comes to these kind of programs, whether it's knitting and crocheting blankets, or, you know, doing drives to get food together, pet food together, pet supplies. So definitely let's not forget about them. Somebody mentioned vet schools. Absolutely. Let's not forget our vet schools. You know, a lot of veterinary institutions, schools are really turning to kind of this social work premise and One Health. And so they are looking for opportunities to get their vet students out into the communities a bit more. So absolutely great ideas. Thank you for that. Oftentimes I ask some of our Safe Housing Grant recipients, folks that we've worked with, you know, what words of wisdom do you have to share? And this particular executive director, she said, you know, I don't know if I have words of wisdom other than collaboration is really the key. You would be surprised who your allies might be. And I cannot express this enough. You know, you don't know unless you ask. So absolutely, just kind of keep an open mind when it comes to collaboration. I encourage you to check out something called asset-based community development. Really great tools on how to build capacity from what you already have. So asking your staff, what connections do they already have? What gifts of the head, heart, and hand do your staff, do your current volunteers already have to share? So let's talk about fundraising for a bit. I know funding came up as one of the biggest barriers to this. So the first thing I want to share with you is that many domestic violence shelters, before they start these programs, are very worried about funding, and they're worried about how they're going to sustain it. And I can easily say that about 90% of the Safe Housing Grant recipients that we have, that we ask them, you know, down the road, how is fundraising for you? How is sustaining your program? And they say, you know what? We have so much community support for it. We shouted it from the rooftops. We don't actually have to dip into our general operating budgets anymore. And there are some ways to work through policies and procedures to kind of help with some funding pieces. And unfortunately, we're just not going to have the time to really dive into policies and procedures today. I do encourage you to reach out to me about that. I know that there was a specific question about sharing policies and procedures, and I absolutely have policies and procedures for you to share or for you to see. I also have organizations that are ready to help you, you know, to kind of walk you through how they came up with their policies and procedures. So definitely please reach out. And I'm also going to give you a link to something called the Sheltering Animals and Families Together manual that really offers a lot of great insight on this. You know, gives you a sample memorandum of understanding, gives you a sample policy and procedure, sample guidelines for your pet owning residents. So a lot of information there. But back to fundraising. So most of the time, domestic violence shelters don't have to dip into their operating budgets because there's a benefit for you, okay? First benefit, public awareness. Let's face it, dogs, cats, kittens, puppies, birds, goats, horses, they're all cute. You have the cute factor on your side, and I encourage you to use it. The second piece, animal lovers are a whole new donor demographic for you. So while animal lovers may not have supported your organization before, they're going to support your organization now because you're going to tell them about the link. You're going to tell them that as part of domestic violence, animals are going to be harmed and abused. And the most exciting piece of this that I want to share with you is that Americans spend $70 billion on their pets each year. $70 billion. I can attest to the fact that I spend a lot of money on my pets. So don't be afraid to use this cute factor. Don't be afraid to shout this from the rooftops that you're doing this, because this really can be a fundraising tool for you. And so with that, I want you to think outside the box on this, okay? So one really great example I like to share is one local to Sacramento. And it's, if you've never been to Sacramento, California, you probably don't know that there's kind of a burgeoning craft beer scene. So a few years ago, a relationship was set up between one of the craft breweries and the local SPCA. And they started doing something called a yappy hour. So it was on a Thursday for an hour, maybe a couple hours, 2 hours. People came in, they had a beer. Part of the proceeds, or part of the beer the cost of the beer went back to the SPCA. But the other really important thing is that the awareness that was gained through all those folks going for a Thursday happy hour. They didn't know that they were going to go to a yappy hour necessarily. And so they got there, they had their beer, and they learned about local organizations working together. So now pretty much on any Thursday, you can go to Sacramento to a brewery and you'll find one of these yappy hour type things, because other breweries got on board with this. Other animal organizations got on board with this. So don't be afraid to think creatively. And I think that's kind of a theme for everybody right now, is to sort of think outside the box. You know, COVID has really forced us to really step outside of our norm. And so be creative and be fun with this. So again, I want you to take about 30 seconds or a minute, and I want you to just think about how you can fundraise to start or sustain a pet-friendly program. And go ahead and drop those into the chat. I love it. Absolutely. The 5K run walks. I've seen a lot of those going virtual this year. Absolutely. Working with the local 4-H groups. Definitely. Love it. Trip raffle. Absolutely. Getting the TV station involved, because remember, you got the cute factor. TV stations like to put cute dogs and cats on the TV. Absolutely. 4-H to help with basic setup and fundraising. Absolutely. So remember the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Apologies for that. There was a organization that got the Boy Scouts, the Eagle. I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar with them. The Eagle Project was to actually set up one of those sheds and kennel stations for them. All right, so I'm going to share a few ideas with you that I've heard over my time talking with domestic violence shelters, because I love them. People come up, you all are coming up with some creative ideas, and so I just want to share a few with you. So trade shows. So the Humane Society of the U.S. has an annual expo that they put together, and part of that expo is folks who create kennels come and they display their wares. And a lot of times it's cheaper to donate those kennels afterwards. It's cheaper than actually sending them back to their location. So think about that. Think about moving or construction companies. So here, think about those pods, those moving pods. So sometimes moving companies or construction companies, if they have a long-term construction project, will have one of those little trailers set up as like an office space there. They'll donate that sometimes. So pet supply stores, I think folks mentioned that. Groomers, absolutely. Dog walks, parades. The turnaround trip is something that came out of San Diego, I believe. And it was a chartered bus trip up to Las Vegas. And so folks paid to be on the bus up to Las Vegas, and they partied and they did things on the bus, and, you know, had fun and raffle items. They went up to Vegas. and then they gambled for a while, and then the bus brought them back. And so proceeds from that actually went to support their pet program. A kissing booth. I love this. So this is a dog kissing booth. So pay to have, an adorable pooch give some kisses. Housing and rental companies. So one point I like to make here is that long-term housing is obviously an issue for any of your survivors. And now when you add on the issue of pets and long-term housing, it can even get a little bit harder. And so I encourage you all to start reaching out to your housing rental companies now and establishing those relationships with them. A lot of times there was an organization in Connecticut who purposely reached out to a development company in their area, and they were so on board with it. They just loved being able to support survivors and their pets, that they started donating money to support the program at the domestic violence shelter. But they also started creating housing and rental housing that was specific to people and pets. And so really as a community, they started turning around their long-term housing and their pet-friendly housing. So again, breweries, and this idea, come as your pet. So this was a fun sort of costume party kind of event where people dressed up as their own pet. So fun ideas there, I think. And then, of course, there's grants through RedRover, through our Safe Housing Grants program. And so this, let me pull up a couple of additional items. So these are funds to really get your program kind of starting up off the ground. So we have grants of up to $20,000 to get you started. We have a few different opportunities underneath this Safe Housing Grant umbrella. We call them on-site, off-site, startup, and animal shelter. So pretty basic. On-site is going to mean that you are going to house pets on-site at your domestic violence shelter. Off-site, or the animal shelter grants, means that pets are going to be housed at your animal rescue partner. And startup is kind of a different, a little bit of a twist on this. So this really gives you the opportunity to create your own program and bring it to us and see if it's something that we can fund. So a lot of times what domestic violence shelters are doing with these startup grants is kind of operating their own safe escape grant program. So we give them a lump sum of money, and then they're able to operate boarding in their own communities. So normally these grants are due on May 15th and October 15th of every year, but with all of the struggles and things happening with COVID, we did push that deadline back to June 30th. So you still have a little bit of time if you want to get those safe housing grants into us. And you can find all of that information on all of those grant opportunities at redrover.org/safehousing. And there is a portion of this, if you want to do, if you want to include some veterinary costs or those vaccination costs, you can include a portion of the grant budget for that. And I think Rachel is still monitoring that, and I'm actually going to ask Rachel to give that portion and answer on what that portion is, because I don't want to misspeak on that. So we'll give Rachel a second to kind of respond on that chat. Thanks, Rachel. And then a highlight. So we started these safe housing grants in 2012. Since then, we have given out 100+ grants for more than $1 million. So it's something that we're really excited about. We really want to help domestic violence organizations and communities develop their own pet-friendly programs. And really, we want to support you along the way. And I also want to give you a few additional funding ideas. So you are going to get all these slides, so don't worry if you can't write all of these down right now. You are going to get these links. So one of the most important ones is this greatergood.org Rescue Rebuild. So we collaborate with them a lot. They're a great partner of ours. Bryn and I, the director there, actually go around the country and do a day-long training on all of this. They're essentially a nonprofit construction program. And so when you get a grant from them, that means you get the funds and the people. They actually come and do the renovation on site. So I want to call them out. I'm going to speed through a couple of these next slides in the interest of time. These are a couple of the photos from projects that we have done with Greater Good. Responders, volunteers to do these projects. Okay, so Resources and next steps. That nonprofit construction organization was greatergood.org, Rescue Rebuild. And you will see a link. Oh, it was the previous slide. But you will get that link for them. So here are a few tips. In the interest of time, I'm going to kind of go through this slide really quickly because I do want to get to some questions and answers. But those are some helpful tips that we found. And then next steps. So ask about pets. Begin building that data set for yourself so that you know how many folks are delaying leaving or how many folks you need to accommodate. Build your program for. Most of the time, we see that only 5 to 10% of your capacity are going to want to house pets on site at a time. So you're only going to have 5 to 10% at any one time of your survivors coming in with pets. We want you to include pets in safety planning. Start helping them figure out what paperwork to get together. That sort of thing. Provide those pet-friendly resources. So you can ask the question now because you have some pet-friendly resources if you didn't before. You have our Safe Escape grants. You have the safeplaceforpets.org website. Educate everyone. So educate your survivors, educate your staff, your board, your community, educate everyone about the link between human violence and animal violence. And reach out to key stakeholders. So start reaching out to those veterinarians in your community, those animal organizations. Reach out to all those folks we identified as organizations that could support your program or help you fundraise, okay? To kind of just read through on your own. And I have to say, I just love looking at that dog. He makes me so happy. Next Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, you can actually join us at our RedRover Facebook page. You can join Bryn and myself for a live Q&A session. We would love to answer your questions on that. So absolutely, please join us Monday, June 15th, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. If you have specific questions that you want to make sure we answer before then, you can send us a message on our Facebook page and we will make sure to cover that. And then finally, I want you to reach out to me. Please ask me questions. Email's probably the quickest way to get in touch with me, but please absolutely reach out to me. I'm here to support you. And I'm right on 12:59, Ashley. So
Great job.
Sorry.
So we still have some attendees hanging around and we'll continue to record. So if I have just one question left in the Q&A, kind of talking about emotional support animals versus service animals. The question is, our agency reserves the right to meet emotional support animals before admitting them, but how are others working with this? So any suggestions on emotional support animals versus service animals?
Yeah, and I will be honest that that's a pretty complex discussion and issue, and one that I would love to kind of talk about that offline, only because I don't want to misspeak to that. And there are many different organizations who are doing it in different ways. And so absolutely, I think there are some tips and things that I can share, but I would love to do that offline.
Great. Well, that question came from Leah Porter. So Leah, if you're still on, please do reach out to Katie and maybe chat a little bit further about that. I remember I did get the honor of attending one of your in-person trainings with Bryn, and I know you went into that, and it was a long conversation. So a lot to go into on that. So if there aren't any other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. I do want to remind all of our call-in listeners that if you do want to receive any of the information, please send me an email so I know where to send that. And with that, anything else you want to conclude with, Katie?
Yeah, you brought up that training actually, and to Leah's question, we will be sending out the link, I believe, to the training seminar handout, and so you will find some
Great.
information on emotional support versus service animals there. So
Great point. All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much, Katie. This was very helpful and very informative. We certainly appreciate your time.
thanks, Ashley, and thank you everyone else.
All right,
Have a
take care.
great day.
Yeah, bye-bye.